All right, this one is interesting. Belief follows behavior. This refers to some of those social phenomenon where if you're in a group and you say something out loud, that tends to increase the chance that you'll believe it. And the same thing, if you act on something before you believe it to be factual, it's more likely that you're going to accept and internalize that belief later. So action generates the associated beliefs. Groups may encourage members to follow group teachings in order to gain belief. Focus on proselytizing and missionary work is to both promote belief in the member as well as the investigator. What do you think?
This sort of reminds me again of like language and really the way that we're meant to repeat mantras, trans women are women, trans men are men, sort of thing. And I feel like a lot of that, I think a lot of people start out where they don't believe it literally. So that people will say trans women are women because they think that women or men who have transitioned to live as women should be treated as if they are women in society. That's the polite thing to do. I think maybe that's where people start when they hear that. And then as you dig deeper and deeper down into it, you realize that there are people who actually believe literally trans women are women, that they are literally women, that they are biologically female, because what makes them a woman is what's in their head, sort of thing. So I think that's where that kind of reminds me of. And the proselytizing. So if you're going around telling people that all the time, I think it like cements it in your own brain as well.
I guess there is a separate thing about proselytizing, but it feels almost like engaging in social media, calling people out, pointing out problematic media, problematic commentary, problematic tweets. All of that seems to be the way that the ideology is spread and reinforced from within the group in wider society. Did you feel any pressure to engage in that type of behavior early on when you're first learning about that, or is it something that just naturally follows as you start to accept those dogmatic pronouncements about what the right way to think and be are?
I think I was doing it pretty early on. That sort of like unsolicited educating of people.
Did engaging in those behaviors, that social media engagement with problematic thinkers, did that increase your commitment to the cause, increase your beliefs, or do you think it existed independent of it?
I think it might have increased it just because it's like if you're talking the talk, you have to walk the walk, sort of thing. So that is what it is, isn't it? Belief follows behavior. But
this one is a little more abstract, so it can be hard to see. I think particularly because this movement it starts so much in the mind and in language and in self-concept that it seems like there's more about who you see yourself as that comes first, and then the behavior comes later. Just in terms of generally people have already crossed a threshold with how they define themselves before they take the step of taking on a new name or socially transitioning. And it seems like a lot of that behavior by necessity has to follow belief. Unless you consider the phenomenon that I've heard of, which is where people will say that there's some people who maybe have a fetish for trans people or see them as the target of their obsession.
I once knew a 14-year-old trans man who was in a relationship with a 25-year-old trans woman, and like the trans woman was the dom and the trans man was the sub. So what you have is like a 25-year-old male who has like a sub who's like a 14-year-old girl. What is that? That's pedophilia. What is that? That's sexual abuse. But for some reason, in the trans community, because the younger one is considered to be the man, it's fine. Or because it's like kinky and we're in like a sex positive environment, it's unquestionable. Like those are the things that happen. And the most disturbing things that happen in that group, like those relationships happened outside the group and we would sometimes talk about them. But within the actual group, a couple of times, do you know what a tranny chaser is? It's somebody who has a fetish for trans people.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize until I was in the group that there are tranny chasers who are themselves trans. So there would be like us trans men who were like under the age of 18, all of us, probably under the age of 16 during this story. And there was these trans women who were in their 40s and they came in and they were literally hitting on us. And they were like being very explicit and very sexual about our bodies. And it's like, we have dysphoria. We came here to talk about our dysphoria, our trans stuff. And they're like talking about, I don't know, I don't want to say on camera, but very explicit things. And people, they didn't want to kick them out. They didn't want to tell them to stop. They just kept like changing the subjects. And I was like, I was shocked because this is supposed to be a place for young people to come and explore and be safe. What the hell is that? That's not safe. That's not a good environment for exploration.
And so they try to go into the community and pretend to be a part of the community. And I've heard of this as it's an accusation that is thrown at detransitioners. You were never really trans. You just had some sort of fixation on it or something, or you were a faker. Is that something that you observed?
I have observed being called fake, or that I wasn't trans the whole time.
I'm trying to remember. There was a word that was specifically given to label people like that. Transtrender, is that where teenagers saw it just as trendy? And so they're like, oh, I'm going to be NB. And then, oh, I'm actually a trans woman or a trans man. But it was for social clout. It was for purposes that weren't real and authentic.
Yeah. But the thing is, I feel like a lot of those people that are doing it for that, their motivation might be clout. I don't think that they're self-aware, that they realize that it's for clout. I think some of them probably do, but I feel like a lot of them are just young people that are like grasping onto an identity and feeling like it's given them a place where they belong. So even though it is to climb the social ladder to some degree, it's also, they wouldn't see it that way, especially because trans people are supposed to be marginalized. So why would you see it as being a social clout thing when you're basically identifying into something that's supposed to be oppressing you?
Marginalized.
Yeah.
I think people will say this is why affluent young white women may be attracted to this, because they really have no markers of oppression until they identify in this way, and then they have a marginalized identity that can place them into the progressive stack at a higher rank than the cis hetero white affluent woman or man for that matter.
In this social justice ideology, there's a hierarchy of who is the most oppressed versus who is the most privileged. The further along you are on the oppressed scale, that means, that your opinion is listened to more. I found myself in this place where I had found the only community of other girls who were more like me in terms of personality. I could relate to them, but it was so enmeshed in this kind of belief system that made me feel really guilty about being a cis, straight, white girl. You begin to feel like a kind of pressure to constantly apologize for yourself. Okay, how do I not be this privileged person anymore? And one thing that's really easy to do is just change your pronouns.
So how are we going to rank belief follows behavior?
I think you had it right. It's more behavior follows belief for a lot of people, especially in terms of it being like a social contagion. I feel like it's an idea that gets into your head and then the behavior comes after. So maybe it's more like mild.
Okay.